What's up? We're here with Neil Potnis. We're going to be interviewing him for his upcoming film, Superhero Anonymous, coming out Sunday, April 25th. Welcome, Neil. How are you feeling today?
Yes, sir. I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you feeling with the film coming out so soon, in a couple days?
In a couple of days. I mean, it's like, I think what? Let me T minus like I think 10 days actually. No, it's April.
Well, when
Today's
this
April
video
5th.
comes out, it'll be a couple
It'll
days.
be in a couple of days.
Yeah.
That is true. Then well, I don't know how April 22nd Neil will be feeling or when this video comes out, but I finished like the final cut last night. You saw the rough cut, but I added some adjustments, showed it to you, showed it to Rohit Vaidula. So we're in the zone right now to make my movie.
Yeah.
How I'm feeling right now, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling confident with what we made. I'm pretty happy with it. So
That's
yeah,
good.
I'm like, of course, a little bit like, oh my god, people are gonna watch it. If they watch it, they're gonna like it. But then, like, in the end of the day, we'll see. So yeah, I'm feeling calm. I think I'm feeling calm now that like I feel like a final version is made. Like I rendered it like 4 to 5 times, saying this is it, and you never know. Like
As the
tomorrow that might
process is,
change. Yeah.
So could you give a quick spoiler-free summary of the Superheroes Anonymous film?
Yes, it'll probably be really brief and
Yeah.
vague because I like to keep it vague.
Yes.
But it's about superheroes going through life.
That's what it is.
That's
Yep.
the best explanation. If I say too much, I feel like it'll reveal.
Yeah.
But I feel like also that captures the essence of what happens.
Yeah,
So yeah.
for sure. Could you maybe go through the cast? I don't know if that will be, going into spoiler territory. If not,
Yeah, so Alex Gonzalez is playing an expletive,
Yes.
is the best way of putting it. He's playing a character who embodies hope. Jack is someone who's playing someone who embodies loneliness. Adri's playing someone who embodies suppressed anger. And then Sean's playing someone who is very mysterious. Arnav is just playing a cool dude, He's just there.
So we're gonna try to keep this a spoiler-free conversation, so everyone can watch this video before the actual film drops. With that being said, when did you first come up, I guess, with the first ideas, the first thoughts of this film, like the first kindling?
Yeah.
ideas?
The reason that's because the idea changed over time, but I think it sparked with like there was this idea that I had where someone gets into a car, they yell, and then someone knocks on a door and they start talking to that person. It's a very just weird base, and the idea is ultimately somewhat in that film, right? And I was like, oh, like what's going on there, right? That's usually what happens is I see something really strange and then it's like, can I make a story out of that? And whether will the story be good or not, we'll see. And then if you remember, I created this really jank Spanish project 2 years ago. It was called like Estupido or something, and it was about someone who believes they're a superhero, but the therapist's trying to convince them that they're not a superhero. In the end, he's like flies up and he's like, oh my god, is he a superhero now? We'll never know because like it cut. So I think using that and fusing that with my idea of like someone yelling and then kind of figuring out what's going on there, and then really I think the inspiration was the idea came around the time when Endgame came out, so like 2 years ago. And there's a scene with Steve Rogers where he's at conducting a therapy session. I thought that was really interesting. I think for me at least, the interesting part about Endgame wasn't the whole ending finale, which was really cool and visually appealing, but it was really the scene where they're just like around a table eating Chinese food, figuring it out, that was the most interesting part to me. And also in Spider-Man 2, the original one with Tobey Maguire, when he quits being Spider-Man, really seeing these godlike figures as humans really interested me. So that was, I think, the idea. And then also that summer of 2019, that was getting into BoJack Horseman, which I can't stop talking about now. And I think the themes in that show. So it was a fusion of a lot of things that came into what I eventually made.
What time? So you're saying it was around 2018, 2019 when it started, the idea.
So it was really summer 2019. Okay, so if you really want to take it back, so this happened in the idea of like someone yelling, right? You and I went to the same high school. We had a psych teacher, and I think there was a competition where it was like come up with the weirdest idea, and whoever comes up with the weirdest idea wins this like certain prize or something. And I'm kind of like, well, if I don't win this because I'm, a weird guy, then what does that say about me, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, come up with the weirdest thing. And the weirdest thing I came up with was like, yeah, sometimes when I get frustrated, I get into my Honda Accord and I just get on the steering wheel and I just yell. And someone was like, he's making that up, and I was making it up. So if you really, I know that's I'm digressing, but that idea of someone yelling and figuring out what's going on with that person, that was something I came up on the spot in a psych class in 2017. So if you really want to date it back, it goes all the way back to like December 2017. But like the idea where like I knew I wanted to make this film, that came about April, May of 2019, and then I created the script in July of that year.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question was, when did you start writing the script and how long did that process take?
This is a process I think you might be familiar with now because you helped me with a lot of my films beforehand, where I realized that I've come to a point where I have zero regard for what I've written on paper. Like I have the essence of what I want to be said, but it's very experimental from that point on and set like, okay, what are we figuring? What are we trying to say? What are we trying to do here? So I think to answer that question, I had an outline. I had an outline ready. I had like a 6-7 part outline. And then as the scenes came, I wrote them. So I had like a rough script ready within 2-3 days. I was watching films that I felt like would inspire the tone of particular scenes. But I also knew that when we come to set, I'm probably going to rewrite the scenes, especially after I had done the Almighty's painting where I had an idea and then like a day or 2 days before I'll rewrite the script. So at this point I had gotten pretty used to my process. So I had a rough script within 2 days. It took me about 2 days. But I knew going in that we're probably going to rework this. I'm going to rework this. And then when we get to set, we're probably going to figure something else out to do. But in the end of the day, I had the essence of what I wanted to say on paper. It was just that, okay, can we come up with something better to say, to execute what's going on in my head, if that makes sense. So kind of digressing there again, but 2 days, wrote the script, and then when we got to set, we just again kind of reworked things.
So in between writing the script and being on set, I'm assuming you did other things like casting and what like explain that process, like between the being like filming and after writing the script.
Yeah, so like the casting process.
Well, I mean, not just casting. I'm assuming you did some other stuff. Maybe you scouted locations out during that time too. Whatever you may have done.
Yeah. So this was this is a very on the spot thing in terms of again location scouting. I think I can speak to that, and I'll keep on bringing it back to you because you've been part of the process before also, where a couple days before we're about to shoot, I'm like, oh shit, I need to figure this out. And then I'd go out with Sean, you drive me to the location, and then I'd figure out where I wanted to do things, what I wanted to do. So that would happen a couple days before the shoot. In terms of casting, my approach towards it was a little different this time from what it was before. When I worked on Chrissy, that was the first time in a while where I had worked with people that I knew, that I was friends with, that I knew I could have an enjoyable time with, right? So when I worked on previous films, I had casted people to be my main actors who I didn't really know, and that kind of showed. So I wasn't having as enjoyable of an experience as I should have, and then that resulted in the film being what it was. So to give an example, whenever I had made Project Cupid, and really the films now that I made in high school, I kind of see as my experimental phase. I don't really like see that as like, oh, this is my film. I do own it as my project, I do. But I really began to get into the groove of things past high school and really figure out how I want to make these films. But I think taking it back in terms of my approach, for example, Project Cupid, whenever we had come up with that interpretive mythological ending that I had, the real reason we had to do that was because we were missing footage, and we couldn't have shot footage because a certain actor was throwing a tantrum or something was going on, right? So after experiences like that, I realized that from this point onwards, I'm just going to cast the people I want to cast, who are my friends. If they're not the lead in like their high school theater group, that's fine, or their college theater group, that's fine. And the example being Alex, right? Alex in this film is the best actor that I've worked with, and he is an ECE major, like electrical computer engineering major, right? So it's not saying that professional acting or professional training doesn't work. I'm just saying that in my case, I wanted to work with my friends. I wanted to work with people I knew I could have a good time with, and not just have them be there, but contribute to the film on set, saying, hey, Neil, what if we tried this? What if we tried it that way? People who really wanted to be there. So my approach was casting my friends. And then from there on, also, I had an idea of who was playing the roles as I was writing it. So that definitely helped. I knew that I wanted Alex to play one character, Britt to play another character, Jack is this. So that was my casting process, casting friends, and then knowing in my head who I wanted as I wrote it.
So walk me through, I would say, first give me the highlights of the shooting, of like being on set and getting all the shots in.
Well, I was talking about casting earlier, right? And it really showed this time. The positives far outweigh the negatives. Can't even think of that many negatives. The only negative being that year gap between shooting because of COVID-19. I can tell you my favorite experience. Yeah, and the overall experience I felt throughout the shoot that I talked about again earlier is that these were friends who genuinely came to shoot wanting to get it done and get it done properly. So the best example is there's a scene with Alex's character, Jack's character on a bench, and they're talking. And I remember I would kind of chunk it. So I would have, all right, 5 lines of dialogue, chunk, we'll cut it here, then we'll shoot the next. And every time we did that, I'd sit on the bench with Alex and we'd kind of rework what we wanted to say on Jack and Sean. And well, Sean didn't have any lines, but I'd get like their input on, okay, should it be said this way? What do you think? Alex would ask me, okay, what are you trying to say here? I don't want to lose the essence of what you're trying to say here, but we can rework it. And then he'd say, what about this? And be like, yes. Or it'd be, no, I want it to be said exactly the way it is on paper. So that was a really good collaborative experience for people, or they just came to the shoot with ideas and what if moments. I think the best way I described it when we were shooting in the garage a couple weeks ago was it felt like almost you were on a playground, you know, like, oh, like what if Abrar did this and then, you know, Rohit did that? Wouldn't that be funny, right? And then we would shoot that. Like, that's how that process was. And that's why it was so fulfilling and exciting to do something like that, because again, I was working with my friends who really wanted to get it done properly, not just, you know, read what's on script and then call it a day and get out of there. As much as those shoots would go on for some time, eventually people wanted to get out of there. They wanted to make sure we were doing it right. So I never came to the shoots like, this is the script, this is the law, this is what we're saying. I got to a point where I was actually relying on the input of the actors to rework whatever was on paper, to a point where I just began half-ass it. I was just like, this is what I'm saying, you know, this is what I'm trying to say, but let's see if we can come up with something better. So there was a lot of improv. I think that was the experience that I really enjoyed. And that was, I think, my process elevated to a different level. And that's what I was always feeling. I did that a little bit with the Almighty's painting, where I just rewrote it the day before. The difference was this time I had actors who would give their input, and their input would be valid rather than just taking what was there.
With that being said, I guess the opposite would be, what's an experience that you feel like you learned from that you'll improve on for the next time you make a film?
For example, the first script I wrote, the ending is completely different from wherever I land the film now. So being comfortable with ambiguity, that's something I got used to, because that year gap that I had, I began to, again, look at the film, realize that the ending is a little bit too twisted for how the film's vibe is going. If you know, like at the end of every film, I have this necessity to just twist things and be like, got you, look what I did, right? And with this, it was, that isn't what I need to do with this film. The original ending was Jack's character does something extreme, and then in the end it's like, oh, so is he really the hero, right? Which still is an interesting idea, but I just didn't feel like it was fitting for the vibe or the tone of the film that I was making. So being comfortable with ambiguity, being okay with adjusting the ending was something that I got used to. And also realizing that a film doesn't have to have this massive twist or this massive like climax, or even I think getting used to the way 70s and 80s films were shot is that not every single scene has to go somewhere. Not every single scene something has to happen, you know? Just let it marinate, just rest in the moment, and then the ending will take you where it takes you, and then you'll understand the point of the film. People had that frustration with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was 3 hours of just what is going on here.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that movie is amazing. Of course, some people didn't like it because something's not happening at every moment. It's not like his earlier films like Django or Kill Bill. It's more in the area of Pulp Fiction, reminiscent of films of that time also, right? So I think first being good with ambiguity, being okay with it, figuring out things as you go, adjusting things, and also realizing that it's okay to make a film that doesn't have every scene taking you somewhere crucial at every single moment. Even though I think arguably it does, it's not like, you know, Alex is getting out of his seat and slapping Jack, and you're like, oh my God, what do we do now, right?
Yeah.
So if anything, that's what I learned to be okay with, being okay with ambiguity, and also trusting my own process and realizing that eventually we'll get there.
So I guess that then leads into the production process or the editing process. How long did that take? What was your process with that?
I decided to shoot this thing linearly. Usually you don't do that. Usually you shoot it out of order. I did basically all the things that you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to be okay with shooting it out of order. You don't usually edit it as you go. You have to be okay with not casting your friends. It got to a point again after the first couple of films that I made, I was like, screw that, right? I'm doing it the way I think best fit. Because after I had made Chrissy, which was in order, I realized that that's my process, and if it means I have to apply it to a longer film, I'll start doing that. This time I shot it in order and I edited it as I went. So editing it gave me a sense of what the tone of the film is, and then I was able to apply that tone and continue that tone throughout the film. So that's one thing that definitely did change in that with this process, because of what Chrissy taught me, that, oh, this works, I'm gonna apply it to this on a larger scale, shoot it linearly to a point where even the last scene, there was a drone shot in the beginning of the scene and there's a drone shot at the end. And then Alex was like, if it's a 20-minute battery, 20-minute charge on that drone, why don't you just shoot the beginning at the end at once? And I'd gotten so used to the process of shooting in order, where I said, no, I'm gonna shoot this drone shot in the beginning, we'll do the scene, and then we'll shoot the drone shot at the end of this shoot. And that's partly because the actor's not the only one getting into the zone. It's also the director in some sense, of understanding where the scene is and then understanding how to shoot it, right? So then going through that experience of that scene, you're better able to shoot whatever you want to shoot because you understand everything that built up to it. If, tonally, if that makes sense. So because of that, I was very I was adamant on, again, shooting it in order. So I guess, we're not missing anything. If we're missing anything, I can add it. It was just helpful with my process and understanding the film better.
So would you say there are any films, TV shows, books, anything that maybe inspired you or helped you sort of structure, write, shoot, inspired you in any way to make this?
Oh, there were tons.
Could you list some of them and maybe how, the most influential ones?
Well, I think throughout the process there were many. So when I was writing it, one of them was Shrek. Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. I watched. I mean, they're amazing films. They're genuinely hilarious. I know Shrek's become a meme. But no one can
I think it became a meme because it was good. So it sort of works out.
So Shrek was one of them. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. That actually heavily inspired the scene with between Adrit and Steven in the beginning. Although I had made that role for Adrit person in mind as I was writing it was Jack Nicholson. Of course, I'm not gonna get Jack Nicholson, right?
Of course.
I'm not gonna get a 30-year-old Jack Nicholson, but the tone of that film and what was going on there, I was able to apply to that scene. So Shrek, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest were the two big ones when I was writing it. Of course, and that said a little bit of BoJack and its themes, and then as I was shooting it near the end, so these past 2 months actually, I just watched anything that resembled the tone of the film that I was making, or if it was an ensemble film, I would watch an ensemble film. So one of the heavy influences being Taika Waititi's style of filmmaking and his tone. I watched Hunt for the Wilder People, and we watched Thor Ragnarok, and then Guardians of the Galaxy I watched, The Incredibles I watched. So a lot of ensemble films. That was a big one. Rango, I watched Rango for the first time actually, and that was a huge influence tonally as I continued to shoot this thing. So there were a lot, but I think the main ones I would cite would be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and then Shrek. Strangely, it's an odd combo. It's a very odd combo. And then really the scenes from Endgame and Spider-Man 2, especially from Spider-Man 2, where he's talking to Aunt May and he's quit being Spider-Man. Aunt May talks about how we all need a hero, someone to look up to. So actually, really, it was those two scenes. It wasn't an entire movie, but it was scenes. It was snippets within films that inspired me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially since it is a short film, so it makes sense if you took snippets from a film to help inspire you. Could you go more in depth and elaborate on you said you improv the comedy and a lot of the scenes?
Yeah.
You worked with the actors. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah. Well, I think going into this, and you and I have been talking about this for a while, where we wanted to make a film where we just had fun, right? Which is weird because when you're making movies, right? As a our age, we should be having fun. We shouldn't be stressing this early on, but they're stressful.
Yeah.
They can be. But I've been trying to make a film like this for a while, since the first Spanish project you and I worked on in high school. Like, now we look back at it and we're like, what the hell is this, right? But the vibe we had on set was very fun, and still to this day a memory that we look back on fondly. So I knew going in that I just wanted to have fun, right? So that allowed for improv. So for example, Sean had to go through a lot. He played a certain character where certain actions happen, and you're just like, how did you convince him to do that, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, it was very experimental on set. It was someone saying something like, oh, what if we did this? And then we eventually did it, as long as we didn't go too far with it. What makes comedy funny is that there are barriers, and what's funny about it is that you're passing those barriers. If you have no restrictions, then it's just going all out crazy berserk, and it turns from being comedy to just flat out stupid. Like, stupidity can still be funny, but it's stupid comedy. You don't want to go for just full stupid, right? And that was the line that we had to also draw, was Sean's character is hilarious, but we never want to turn him into like a Jar Jar Binks character. That's how we handled that. And I think really in the end of the day, kind of realizing that this is my tone of making things. They're fun, they should be enjoyable, they shouldn't be like, oh my god, my mind is blown. Like, they can be, but I just didn't want to take it too seriously either. And also realizing that in the end of the day, I don't think comedy is just a genre really, but more so a mechanism of telling a story. So for example, whenever people talk about the Marvel films, and when they're really coming up, people are like, oh my god, that's a superhero film and it's funny. Well, why can't it be, right? Like, why can't humor be a thing in films? Like, why is it only limited to a genre? So realizing, again, my tone, that I wanted to make it enjoyable. If I can make it funny, we'll try and make it funny. And then at the same time, making sure that I have a point at the end. That was my approach. And really, I was talking to Adrit about this, is that 2 years ago when I wrote this thing, initially I was like, yeah, this is a very goofy concept, and the shit I'm asking people to do is really goofy. But once you begin filming it, for example, Andre or Raheem had seen the rough cut, and they would be laughing at certain scenes, and part of me was like, I didn't intend that to be funny, but when I initially wrote it, I did. It's just that once you get used to it, you forget that it's funny that, for example, Sean's getting into a cardboard box, for example, right? Like this tiny little thing that goes in the film.
Yeah.
Like that situation's hilarious, but you forget it's funny because you're so used to it now because you're shooting it and it's been in your head for so long. For me, I realized yesterday that for the most part, the situation in every single scene is ridiculous and people are going to be laughing no matter what, but that was the intent. It's just that I got used to it.
Yeah.
And in the end, I have my point in the point being that we can commit superhero acts that aren't fighting someone in the sky and flying around. A superhero act can be as simple as being there for your friend and doing something for them. Yeah. And that's what the ending quote is about also. It's about how superhero acts, most of the time, are remarkably undramatic. So finding that balance between comedy and also getting my point across with a little bit of improv. And also, again, making sure we're not taking ourselves too seriously. That was something that I didn't want to do, because looking at some of my previous films, I was like, oh, we could have done that differently. Being a little bit more self-aware helped, and I think Alex definitely helped with that too. Having a background in doing stand-up, I have a feeling that being funny, being a stand-up, you have to be self-aware in some sense, and he brought that to the film.
So you mentioned how you had to take a 1-year break because of COVID. How would you say COVID has affected the film, if at all?
When I initially wrote the film, it was more of these supers are facing issues, and I'm of course past issues, right? Which no one is, especially me. But strangely enough, when we got back onto it a year later, a lot of us were in the same mental space these characters were in, the characters that I wrote, especially myself. So I doing this the past month is when we did the last 3 scenes, I felt more in my element than I had in a while, because I hadn't been creating things, releasing them, putting them on YouTube for people to consume in some time. It's been a while since I've been on that conveyor belt and pushing things out. So doing this again was very therapeutic, but this wasn't more of an escape, but more of a way of facing the things that were going inside my head. And I know, without revealing too much, there are also a lot of people, or a lot of the actors also on set, who have had a pretty tough go of it the past couple of months. But again, I've gotten to a point where I see art in general as not something as an escapism, or it can be, but in the end of the day, as a reflection of what goes on in our head. And again, with this, really facing the issues that I've been kind of going through. So strangely enough, it became, again, the mindset these characters were in was a mindset that I was in, some others were in, and doing this really helped me with just feeling okay, feeling mentally sound. It was strangely therapeutic near the end, but yeah, I think that's how I would say that year, I guess, impacted the last month. It was one of those things where in the beginning, with the scene with Adrit and Alex, which a lot of people have seen at this point, I've shown it at the wingding. For anyone who doesn't know, wingding is a synonym for a party. So now you know, your vocabulary has increased. But so that scene a lot of people have seen. And initially I viewed it as, oh, this is a good scene, right? Like, oh, this is pretty good. And now I see it as something I recognize, strangely enough. That suppressed anger that Adrit has, or that sense of just, indifference that Alex's character has, I felt. And I was able to then take that mindset and execute it the way I wanted to execute it near the end when I shot the last 3 scenes the past month.
So wrapping it up, what advice would you have for your fellow creatives, whether it's specific to filmmaking or just in general creating art?
Ooh, fellow creative. Fellow creatives.
Not necessarily advice in the sense that, oh, you're perfect and like you're a master at your craft. More in the sense of you've been doing this for a couple years. There might be someone else who's just starting out, or someone else who's doing something else and they want to break into something. Just in general, you might have an experience that even someone else who's been doing creative stuff for years might benefit from hearing.
What I made here was kind of a combination of all the things that I had learned. And I talked about my experimental phase previously in high school. If I wouldn't have gone through that, I wouldn't have had this. Like you want your first product, whatever you make, to be perfect, and it's not going to be. This film, I don't think it's perfect either. No film is.
Yeah.
And your first film is gonna be, or whatever you make is always gonna be rough, no matter how good you think you can make it.
Yeah.
And that's something you have to be comfortable with, because know that it might be rusty in the beginning, but you're getting somewhere. And when you get there, it's going to feel that much better because it was years of work to get there. So, and again, like I said, I'm not there yet. I don't think anybody is ever there. But I was really proud of this product because it was a combination of everything that I had learned, and then I learned more. Example, coming to set, feeling okay with ambiguity, feeling okay with improv, knowing my process. You're not going to know your process with whatever you do in the beginning. You learn your process by actually beginning and doing that thing. So I guess that's the advice I'd give.
That's very good advice, yeah. So everyone make sure to check out the film Superheroes Anonymous, coming out in a couple days after this, Sunday, April 25th. And,
April 25th.
Wait, that is right?
April 25th, yeah.
Yes, okay. I had a brain fart there.
Also, subscribe to Abrar Chowdhury on YouTube. he does things, and they're things that you'll probably enjoy.
Hopefully, I hope. Okay,
well. I enjoy them. I like them. So
thank you.
You'll like them too.
And thank you everyone else for listening, and I hope everyone learned something.
I feel like this was a little bit of a serious convo, and you and I aren't serious people. We need to let's end with something more
uplifting. Okay.
Uplifting. Okay. Vaccine. Get vaccinated. There you go.
Yes.
If you're not getting vaccinated, get vaccinated. Yeah, my appointment's coming up. By the time y'all see this, I will already have gotten my first dose.
Yeah.
So do that thing. Get vaccinated, and then make the world a better place. There we go. That's how we can end it.
That's perfect. And it's a positive note too. Beautiful. So everyone, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you later.